DreAllDay.com.
You're now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. Then what we do is we put all this together into one bundle, one philosophy, one package. We've codified our whole system. We've created a streamlined process that you can follow. We got a hardcover book of Open Enrollment University, and you're listening to the daily masterclass that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today we are going to talk about the number one skill that made my career and continues to make my business. And yes, there is one. Now there could be several that I can name, and several that I can talk about, and I'm giving you over 1,700 episodes where we talk about, no episode in the show is about failing. This show is about creating success and perpetuating success. But if I had to talk about just one specific skill, because I get asked often, when I get introduced to new audiences, when I come in front of an audience of people who haven't met me before, whether that's at a speaking gig somewhere, or I appear on somebody else's show, or I meet someone and they have some idea of my background, I often get asked the question, how? How were you able to go from the humble beginnings in the sports world to actually making it pro and sustaining a career out there? How did you go from being unknown online to building a brand? How did you go from, when you first started in the entrepreneurship world and you didn't really know anything and didn't really know anybody, to establishing yourself and being a well-known name out here in your thought leadership space and in your industry? How were you able to do these things? And the answer to that question, there are several answers. One of them is discipline, confidence, mental toughness, and personal initiative. But the other is the one that this whole episode is based around. So without further ado, let's get right into our points, because I will not bury the lead. I'll give it to you right here in point number one. The topic again, number one skill that made my career in sports and business. The answer is selling myself. Number one skill that made my career in sports is my ability to sell myself. Number one skill that got me known online, selling myself. Number one skill in the business world, selling myself. This is the skill. When I was editing the editing process of Work on Your Game, the hardcover book, the editor, I remember we were working on chapter, I believe it's chapter 7, and the title is Selling Yourself. I don't know what number chapter it is. I think it's chapter 7, but it might not be. But there is a chapter in the book called Selling Yourself. And I remember the editor, she is very traditional background, definitely not from the background that I'm from. And she left a note. We're going back and forth in Google Docs and editing, and she left a note on the title, Selling Yourself. And she said, this title seems a little risque. Do you want to change it? And I commented back to her, you must be joking. And she didn't say anything else. So I think she got the point. Now, one way that people look at the phrase selling yourself, if you actually look at the definition, it doesn't really have a specific definition, because it's a phrase and not a word. But the definition that I saw when I was looking it up and making my notes for this episode, it says a person who sells themselves at a price, meaning you rent yourself out at a price, especially for something nefarious or illegal, such as prostitution. So I think that's what she was thinking of, like prostitution, selling yourself. That's not the kind of selling yourself that I'm talking about here, but it could be. I'm not telling you what to use it for. Don't do anything illegal. What I mean when I say selling yourself, what I mean is getting people to understand the value that you bring to the table and then getting something back from it. That's what I'm talking about when I say selling yourself. My definition of the phrase is persuading others to see the value of what you offer, and thus they are willing to take the next step with you. That's what I mean when I say selling yourself. Let me say it again. Persuading others to see the value of what you offer, and thusly they are willing to take the next step with you. For example, if you're an athlete, you had to sell yourself during the tryout period in order to get on the team. And if the team likes you during the tryout period, then they will purchase you, not in a indentured service type of way, but they will purchase you in the form of offering you a contract. If they like you, they'll offer you a contract. But you had to sell yourself in the tryout to get the contract. If you put your job resume out there on the internet or on LinkedIn or something, and somebody comes across your job resume, then they will call you and say, hey, we're interested in interviewing you for this position. What did you do? The resume sold you. You sold yourself with the resume in order to get the job interview. And if you sell yourself in the job interview, then you'll get a job offer. And then you can go work there and you get the money and everyone lives happily ever after. If you meet someone, your friend hooks you up, say, I got somebody I want you to meet. You meet that individual, you like them, they like you, you sell yourself well enough to that individual, then you may go on a date with that person. So you sold yourself in order to get them to either be interested in asking you on a date or to get them to say yes when you ask them on a date, whatever the situation happens to be. But selling yourself is your ability to persuade others to understand your value and thus want to keep dealing with you because they see the value that you bring to the table. If you do not have the ability to sell yourself, you can be really good at what you do but be completely unfulfilled simply because you're never able to generate the return on investment from the value that you have created and want to bring to the table, the value that you worked on your game to have. Point number 2, the topic here today, we're talking the number 1 skill that made my career in sports and in business, and is selling yourself is the answer. Number 2, many times in life you have to sell yourself just to get the chance to sell yourself. You have to sell yourself once just to get the chance to, you got to sell yourself in the preliminaries to get the chance to sell yourself for real. You get what I'm saying? In the sports world, for example, sometimes there are tryouts. I just use the example of tryouts and then you get offered a contract. But sometimes in life, in the sports life, there's a tryout that's only invitation only. Everybody can't come to the tryout. It's not an open tryout where anybody who pays the money can come. Like the NBA G League, they have an open tryout. They have open tryouts every year. At least the local teams do. Then they have national tryouts that they claim are invite only, but they probably take everybody's money. But the point is, there are some tryouts where you can't even go in the gym unless you know somebody who knows somebody. If you didn't get a phone call, if they didn't invite you, you can't even come in the tryout. And there might be 20 guys at the tryout, but they're only signing one player. So even the 20 guys who got into the tryout, 19 of them are going to go home unhappy. Maybe all 20 of them. They might not like anybody. But you had to sell yourself just to be one of the 20 who got into the gym just to get turned down. Like you got to sell yourself just to get turned down. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes in the speaking business, for example, you're trying to get a speaking gig, you have to sell yourself just to be amongst the 10 finalists for the keynote spots that they're hiring for. They might be hiring 3 keynotes. They got 10 people who are finalists. You had to sell yourself just to be one of the 10 finalists. And 7 of them ain't getting the gig. Maybe all 10 of them won't get the gig. They'll hire 3 completely different people. Not everybody gets a chance to even be looked at out here in this life. In the book publishing world, if you want to get a publishing contract from a traditional publisher, you can't just call Simon & Schuster or Random House or McGraw-Hill or Penguin and say, hey, I got a book and I'm really good and I got followers. Can you publish my book? They're not taking your call. If you call one of those, you're going to get an administrator who just got hired 3 weeks ago and they know exactly how to handle people like you. And the way that they handle you is not sending you to somebody who can actually do something. All right, the way they handle you is to get rid of you. All right, that's what they do. That's their job. They get hired to get rid of you. They get paid to get rid of you. You can't just call them. If you want to get a publishing deal, you have to go through a literary agent. And a literary agent then pitches your work to the publishing houses. Publishing houses only take the calls, the editors rather, they only take the calls from the literary agents. And if you can't sell yourself to the agent, you will never get a publishing deal. The agent is the one who sells you to the publisher. And if the agent doesn't like you, then the publisher will never even know that you exist. This is all part of the game. So the sale that you gotta make if you want to get a publishing deal writing a book is not to the companies that actually publish the book. You gotta sell yourself to the agents who receive 100 manuscripts every single day from hungry authors just like you who want somebody to sign them to a publishing deal, and they gotta sift through all of them to find a few that they want to take to the publisher and say, hey, here are the 10 that I think are worthy of a publishing deal, and maybe 4 of those 10 are going to actually get a deal. Maybe 4 of those 10 actually even get an offer, let alone a deal. But this is part of the game that you must 100% embrace these days, especially nowadays. And one of the reasons why you must embrace it even more these days is because there are so many people trying to sell themselves these days that a different type of barrier has been created. So there used to be a certain barrier to entry that there were gatekeepers, that everybody had to go through the gatekeepers to get on. That doesn't happen anymore. Nowadays, you can do a lot of stuff without the gatekeepers. If you want to self-publish a book, go ahead. You can have a book on Amazon by tomorrow morning and be selling it by tomorrow morning if you want to. If you want to go through a traditional publisher, the gatekeepers are still there, but at the same time, in other areas of life where things are much more wide open and flattened and democratized, because there are so many people trying to put themselves on, so many people putting themselves out there, there are other levels now that the level of, all right, just to get the chance to put yourself out there, that's gone. Now everybody can do that. Now there's a new level. New levels have been erected simply because we can't listen to everybody. We can't read everybody's book. We can't look at everybody's Instagram. All right, so now we got to create new barriers to keep the people out who we don't want in. So you must be understanding and you must embrace the fact that there are two sales you got to make. You got to sell yourself just to get the chance to get looked at, then sell yourself while you're getting looked at. Many people, especially creatives out there, those of you who are creators, you don't consider yourself a marketer or a salesperson, but much more of a creator. And you see how many episodes I've dedicated on this show to selling and to marketing and to making sure you're putting your stuff out so that somebody actually wants it, much more than I even spend on creating. Because I think a lot of creators you're already a creator if you're here. I think I attract a lot of creators, but you got to shift your mindset, at least give half of it to the marketing and sales side of what you're doing. Many people out there do not understand this concept of from making the first sale to make the second sale. Either they don't understand it or they fail to execute on it. You understand it, you get it, but maybe you don't agree with it. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe you have some unconscious inhibitions about it. Maybe there's some unspoken resistance that you have around the concept. And for whatever reason, you don't execute on it. And what results from that is that you have gain, you got value that you can offer to the world, but you're not willing to do the work to sell yourself into consideration. You can't get the consideration that you deserve because you don't want to sell yourself. Because for some reason, you abhor the very concept of having to sell yourself. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is the number one skill that made my career and made my business happen. And the answer is selling yourself. Number 3. Here's a paradoxical truth that I want you to burn into your brain. The better you are at selling yourself, the less good your actual game needs to be. I'm pausing there for emphasis because I want to make sure that's sunk in. They say if you speak again too fast, people don't get a chance to understand what you just said. But that's why this is recorded, so you can rewind and listen to it over and over again. But I'm going to say that one again anyway. A paradoxical truth is the better you are at selling yourself, the less good your actual game needs to be. And yes, that's not a joke. Have you ever gone to a conference and seen a speaker on stage who was really not very good? They didn't have much content to what they were saying. It wasn't much value to what they were saying, but they were on stage. Somebody hired them. Somebody paid them to be on the stage. Listen, I've seen those speakers who should not have been on the stage at all. How'd they get on the stage? Because they know how to sell themselves. Have you ever read a book that was on the bestseller list, and when you read it, you were like, this book is actually not even that good. This book is actually kind of garbage, but it's on the bestseller list? I have. How'd that happen? Because I often knew how to sell themselves. Have you ever been outside, at the mall, at the movies, anywhere in the world, walking down the street, on this social media, and you seen an ugly guy with a really pretty girl? How'd that happen? The guy knew how to sell himself. Here's a disclaimer that I want to throw into that. If you're really good at selling yourself and you're actually good at what you do, you're going to get amazing results. But if you're really good at selling yourself and you're kind of mediocre or even trash at what you do, you can do pretty well, even if you're mediocre or trash. Why? Because you know how to sell yourself. You can get the registers ringing. You can get butts in the seats. This is a paradoxical truth of life that a lot of creatives, and I think there are a lot more creatives out here than there are salespeople, honestly. I was at a sales conference not too long ago, and a person on stage says, how many people in this room would consider themselves, and he was making a clear difference between the creators and the marketers and the salespeople. And he was saying, all right, how many people in this room consider themselves to be a creator, much more creator than a marketer? And like 80% of the room raised their hand. And he said, how many people in the room consider themselves to be more of a marketer / salesperson than a creator? And like 5% of the people in the room raised their hand. The rest of them didn't participate. And I think a lot of the world is like that, especially nowadays when anyone can pretty much create anything. Listen, you've been able to sell anything for a long time. It's the creation platforms and the creation tools that have opened everything up. Now you can create a book. You can create an Instagram profile. You can create a YouTube channel / TV network. You can create a radio show / podcast. There are all these things that can be created these days, but it's not like the platforms for selling have changed. They've always been around. For the most part, they've always been here. But there are a lot of creators out here who are really good at creating, but they don't even have the mindset aside. They can't even say they're bad at selling because they're not even trying. Because they don't even understand that sales do have to happen. And the better you get at selling yourself, the less your game needs to be good to make up for the fact that you can't sell yourself. So when you're good at both, then the floodgates open. and everything becomes really, really easy. And if you're already really good at what you do, all you need to do is learn how to sell, or you can connect yourself to someone who does know how to sell. So you don't have to learn how to sell if you don't want to. If you just want to create and that's all you want to do, then needs to be your number one order of business. Find a business partner, someone who can sell, who can help get your name out there. Now, if you want to learn how to sell, there are plenty of resources out there for you to do so. You can start by reading my book called The Seller's Mindset. Then you can take my course called Sell Yourself, and then you can listen to every episode about selling yourself that I put, and selling period, and marketing that I have here on this masterclass. But that selling aspect does need to happen if you want anybody to know about the game that you've created. Point number 4. Topic today is the number one skill that made my athletic and professional business career. The answer is selling yourself. Number 4, start small and go big. What I mean by that, and this is what I'm talking in the context of selling yourself. So when you first start out, you might only get a small chance at first. You might only get like a little chance to sell yourself. You kill it with the little chance of selling yourself, it'll lead to a bigger chance. I remember I was speaking at this conference once in Atlanta, and the guy didn't really know me. I had reached out to him. I cold called, reached out to him, sold myself. I sold myself well enough for him to give me a look. He was paying attention. He was taking a look at me, trying to decide if I had anything to offer. And he said, all right, you can come and speak at the conference and do what you got to do. And I remember going to the conference, and we're in this big venue, and he told me what room I was going to be speaking in. He had me in this room that was like all the way kind of like in the back of the conference hall, and you had to go down this long hallway. There was construction over here, and it was all dusty and all this stuff. It was basically like a closet that he had me in. It was bigger than a closet, but the room was way, way in the back of the conference. I'm like, oh, they put me in the new guy room. All right, that's what that was, the new guy room. Nobody knows you. Nobody knows that you're any good. So if you're trash, at least nobody's going to know about it because we got you all the way here in the back. But my room, when I did my presentation, I think because the way I sold myself through the titling of my presentation, I hope y'all are reading between the lines of this context. The way I sold myself in the titling of the presentation, the room was so packed. When I did my presentation, I did my first one at it was like 10 o'clock in the morning on whatever day that was. The guy, when they heard about the kind of turnout that I had for my first presentation, I only had one presentation, he asked me if I could do the same presentation again, do an encore presentation later on that afternoon at like 2 o'clock in the exact same room, because the response was so strong to my first presentation. Now, I'm telling you that not to pat myself on the back or to impress you, maybe a little bit of both, but really seriously to impress upon you that was a small opportunity. The small opportunity was them putting me in that little room to begin with. The bigger opportunity was them asking me to do it again. And I said, yeah. I didn't say this to him, but I'm thinking to myself like, yeah, motherfucker, now you know I'm for real. Another situation, this also happened in the speaking business. I was speaking at a conference and they didn't know me. Again, I reached out, sold myself, cold call, selling myself. I filled out, I think, a speaker application. They had no idea who I was. And I remember going to speak at the conference, and before the conference, they were asking every speaker, please submit your presentation. That's like the slideshow, the PowerPoint that you're going to use along with your presentation. And I wrote to the organizers. I said, hey, I don't use slides. There is no PowerPoint presentation to my speech. I'm going to just talk, and everybody's going to watch me and listen to me, and that's all I need. And a woman pushed back and said, well, we kind of require all of our speakers to submit a presentation. And I said, well, I don't use a presentation. So what do you want me to do? Just make one up and then not use it? Because I'm not using it when I speak, whether you make me submit it or not. And the guy, the big boss of the whole thing, the guy who's running the whole thing, he jumps into the email chain and he says, Dre, I'm really going to have to insist that you include some slides with your presentation, because we know our audience and they like to see slides. They like to be able to look at things visually as well as listen to things auditorily while they're being presented to. You really should make slides. I think it will really make your presentation a lot better in your audience. The audience will receive it a lot more. And I'm like, this guy really does not know who the fuck he's talking to. But I'm like, all right, I went and made a slide. Yes, you heard me. I made a slide. Here was the slide. The slide said, Dre Baldwin, work on your game. That's all it said. There was only one slide. And then while I'm in the room giving my presentation, this is a true story. I'm in the room giving my presentation. That one slide is right up there on the screen. So when I started my presentation, I spoke for about 2 minutes, and then I looked over at the slides. I turned my body towards the slide projector, and I said to everybody in the room, listen, I know you all are used to looking at slides during presentations, but I want to let you all know that is the whole slide. There are no other slides on this presentation, so all y'all need to do is just watch me. And then everybody laughed, and a few people clapped, and then I went on to finish my presentation. Now here's what happened the rest of that story. I give my presentation. People liked it, fine. People come shake your hand, take pictures, whatever. I leave. It was over. The presentation was like in March. I got a phone call from the people who ran that same event. The same woman who asked that I give them some slides. The same man who jumped on and insisted that I have slides. They called me around October of that same year, and this is what they said. They said, the response to your presentation, Dre, and this is like a breakout room session. Those of you know what a breakout room is? When you go to a conference and it's like 10 different presentations going on at the same time, you can just pick which one you want to go to. That's what I had done. It was a breakout room. They said the response to your presentation was so strong in that breakout room that we want to hire you to come be our keynote speaker at next year's conference. Now, the first year when I had done that breakout, they had no idea who I was. They did not know my name, did not know me from anywhere, didn't pay me to speak. I paid my own way to go speak at their conference. I paid for my hotel. I paid for my flight. I paid for my food. I paid for everything just to go and speak at their conference. Sold myself so well through my performance that they called me back and offered to pay me to do the next one. Now, again, I'm not telling you that to impress you, maybe a little bit, but really to impress upon you that I was able to sell myself. I had to sell myself once just to get them to look at my application, sell myself to get chosen to give a speech for free that I had to pay for. Then they started selling me once I made the first 2 sales. And then I had to sell myself through the presentation, right? So I had to sell 3 times. Then they made a sale. And this is the game, people. I didn't complain about it. I didn't say, man, this is messed up. I got to go pay my own way to go speak at this conference. I didn't have to do it. I could have said no. I chose to do it because I understood that I had the game. I knew that once I got on that stage and showed what the hell I could do, it was game over. And that's the mentality that I want you to take to what you're doing. That once you get your opportunity and show what you can do, everybody's going to know what time it is. But you got to be good enough to back that up. It's one thing to believe it, it's another thing to know it. And believing it is you think it, and yeah, I read that somewhere, and it was in a book, and I wrote it down. I saw it on Instagram, and you know, put it in your journal and on your vision board. Knowing it is, you ain't got to talk about it. It's just happening. Why? Because you got the game. You've done the work ahead of time. But you got to be sharp with your game. Your game has to be on point. And to work on your game system is only 3 steps. Work on your game, show your game, get paid for your game. Did I not just explain that to you? All right, these are things that I've done myself over and over and over again, from the basketball court to the business world, and I'm showing you how to do it in the Work on Your Game system. And the only way to access the whole Work on Your Game system is in Work on Your Game University. So you go to workonyourgameuniversity.com to get access to that. But let me recap these points that I'm doing here today. I didn't even tell you all of them before I tell you as we do the recap. The topic again is number 1 skill to make my career in sports and in business. The answer is selling myself. That's point number 1. Selling yourself is a skill. The definition I give of selling yourself is persuading others to see the value of what you offer and thus being willing to take the next step with you. That means going from a tryout to a contract, from a resume to a job interview, from an introduction to a first date. Number 2, many times in life you got to sell yourself just to get the chance to sell yourself. Not everybody gets a chance to even be looked at for consideration, let alone to be chosen. Many people either don't understand that they had to make 2 sales, or they just fail to execute on making both sales. So even though they have game, they don't do the work to sell themselves, and they never get considered. So they get all that value and they take it. Where do they take it? To the most valuable real estate on earth that we call the graveyard, that we talked about in episode number 468. Point number 3. The paradoxical truth is the better you are at selling yourself, the less good your game actually needs to be. You ever seen a terrible speaker at a conference who got paid to speak? I have. Have you ever seen a crappy book that made the bestseller list? Yes, I have. Have you ever seen an ugly guy with a pretty girl? Yes, I have. How is that? All of them were able to sell themselves. When you're good at selling yourself and you're actually good at what you do, that's when the amazing thing, that's when the magic happens. And point number 4, start small and go big. You might only get a small chance at first. You kill it with the small chance, you get a bigger chance. In the speaking world, they gave me this small little room in the basement. I killed it. They needed me to speak again. I did a breakout session where I paid all expenses to go do it. Then they asked me to come give a keynote, and they paid me the next time around. I did a free appearance on somebody's show, and that led to business partnership ventures where everybody made money. You start with getting a girl that you like to give you a phone number. You level up to eventually getting married and having kids with her. You start with the small win, then you move up to the big wins, but you got to be willing to sell yourself over and over and over again. It's not a one-time thing. Now, again, the Work on Your Game system, 3 steps. Work on your game, show your game, get paid for your game. If you want to do any one of those 3 or all 3, what you need to do is go to workonyourgameuniversity.com and let's get started and stop playing around. Work on your game. Dre all day.